The boardroom fell silent as I slid the acquisition documents across the mahogany table. $23 million. That's what my tech company was offering for Henderson and Associates, the mid-sized consulting firm that had been Minneapolis' pride for 30 years. The man sitting across from me, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, that same condescending smirk I remembered from countless family dinners, didn't recognize me at first. "Mr. Chen," he said, extending his hand with the practiced charm of someone who'd built his reputation on being the smartest guy in every room. "I have to say, your offer is unexpected for someone so young." I let the moment hang in the air, watching as recognition slowly dawned in his eyes. The color drained from his face when it finally clicked. After all, it had only been 18 months since he'd humiliated me in front of our entire extended family at his lake house in Wayzata, telling everyone I was a disappointment and would never amount to anything in the real world. "Hello, Dad." The conference room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father, Richard Henderson, the man who'd spent my entire life making sure I knew I'd never measure up to his impossible standards, was now staring at his son, the CEO of the company that was about to buy his life's work. The same son he'd written off as a failure was now holding his legacy in the palm of his hand. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about something far more complicated than that. It's about how the worst moment of my life led me to discover who I really was, and how sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones fighting their own battles we never knew existed. This is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to sitting across from my father in a billion-dollar deal, and what I learned about forgiveness along the way. Growing up as a Henderson in Minneapolis meant living under the shadow of success. My father built Henderson and Associates from nothing in the early 90s, turning it into one of the Twin Cities' most respected business consulting firms. Our house in Edina was the kind of place where Fortune 500 executives came for dinner parties, where conversations at the breakfast table revolved around quarterly earnings and market strategies. My mother, Susan, was the perfect complement to my father's ambition, former debutante from old Minneapolis money, involved in every charity board that mattered, the kind of woman who could organize a fundraiser for the Minneapolis Institute of Arts while simultaneously planning a corporate retreat for 200 people. She worshipped my father's drive, often telling us kids that your father's success is what allows us to have this beautiful life. Then there was my older sister Jennifer, who seemed genetically designed to carry on the Henderson legacy. Valedictorian at Blake School, Harvard MBA, now a partner at a major consulting firm in Chicago. She spoke my father's language of profit margins and strategic positioning like it was her native tongue. And then there was me, Michael, the son who was supposed to be the heir apparent but couldn't seem to get anything right. While Jennifer was winning debate tournaments, I was building websites in my bedroom, fascinated by code and algorithms. While she was networking at young professionals events, I was staying up until 3 a.m. working on app prototypes. I remember being 15, showing my father a mobile app I'd built that could help small businesses manage their inventory. I was so excited, thinking he'd finally see that I had something valuable to offer. He glanced at my phone for maybe 30 seconds before handing it back. "That's nice, Michael, but you can't build a real career on computer games. You need to focus on developing actual business skills." The humiliation burned deeper when he turned to Jennifer, who'd just gotten into Harvard, and spent the next hour discussing her internship prospects while I sat there feeling invisible. But the incident that really broke something inside me happened during my senior year at the University of Minnesota. I'd been working on a revolutionary customer relationship management platform with my roommate Dave, and we just secured our first round of angel funding, $50,000 from a local venture capital firm. I was so proud, thinking this would finally prove to my father that my computer games were actually the foundation of a real business. The family gathered for Sunday dinner at the country club in Golden Valley, the same place where my father networked with Minneapolis business elite. I waited until everyone was there, my parents, Jennifer, my Uncle Bob, my grandmother, before announcing my news about the funding. The reaction wasn't what I expected. My father actually laughed. Not a proud laugh, but a dismissive chuckle that made my stomach drop. $50,000? Michael, I spend more than that on office supplies each quarter. When you're ready to talk about real business, millions, not pocket change, then we can have a conversation. Jennifer piled on, explaining to everyone how real venture capital worked, how legitimate startups raise Series A rounds in the millions, not angel rounds in the thousands. My grandmother patted my hand sympathetically, which somehow made it worse. But here's the thing about that dinner. It was also where my father made his grand gesture announcement. He'd been planning to surprise me with an offer to join Henderson and Associates as a junior consultant after graduation, with a clear path to eventually taking over the company. It should have been everything I was supposed to want. Instead, sitting there listening to them dismiss my passion project, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to prove that my computer games could build something bigger than anything my father had ever imagined. What I didn't know then was the secret my father was carrying, the one that would explain so much about why he pushed so hard, why success meant everything to him, and why he was so terrified of me failing. I'd love to know where you're watching this from. Drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're in. It's amazing how these family dynamics play out differently across cultures, but the core feelings seem universal. The annual Henderson family 4th of July weekend at my father's lake house in Wayzata was basically a 3-day performance of success. Every year, the same cast of characters would descend on the sprawling property overlooking Lake Minnetonka. Extended family, business associates, politicians, and anyone else my father wanted to impress with his perfectly curated life. This particular July, 18 months after college graduation, the stakes felt higher than usual. My startup with Dave had grown from that initial $50,000 to a legitimate company with 12 employees and $2.8 million in annual recurring revenue. We were building AI-powered customer analytics software, and companies like Target and 3M were already using our platform. But to my family, I was still the son who'd chosen computers over real business. The house buzzed with preparation for 3 days. My mother orchestrated everything like a military campaign, caterers from Café Lurkit, a bartender who'd worked at the Guthrie Theater's events, even a small fireworks display planned for Sunday night over the lake. Jennifer flew in from Chicago with her new fiancé, a McKinsey consultant who immediately hit it off with my father by discussing market penetration strategies for Fortune 500 companies. Saturday morning, while I was on the dock checking emails about a potential partnership with a major Minneapolis healthcare system, my father approached with his coffee and that look I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was about to offer me guidance about my life choices. Michael, I've been thinking. You've had your fun with this computer thing, but it's time to get serious about your future. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer to join the firm. The offer was impressive, I'll admit, $95,000 starting salary, which was good money in Minneapolis, plus a clear succession plan. In 5 years, I'd be running Henderson and Associates. It was everything the son of Richard Henderson was supposed to want. Dad, I appreciate the offer, but my company is doing really well. We're actually in talks with some major clients about expanding our platform. He cut me off with that dismissive wave I'd seen 1,000 times. Michael, playing around with websites isn't the same as running a real business. You're 24 years old. What could you possibly know about managing people, handling million-dollar budgets, dealing with actual corporate clients? That afternoon, as family and friends gathered around the outdoor bar overlooking the lake, the tension kept escalating. My father held court, regaling everyone with stories about landing a new contract with Medtronic, while I sat nursing a Summit beer and trying to respond professionally to messages from our biggest client. That's when my Uncle Bob, slightly drunk on bourbon and emboldened by the audience, decided to pile on. Richie tells me you're still messing around with computers, Michael. When are you going to get a real job and help your old man build something that matters? Jennifer laughed, actually laughed, and added, he thinks he's the next Mark Zuckerberg, but he's basically running a digital lemonade stand. The whole group erupted in laughter. Cousins, family, friends, even my grandmother chuckled. I felt my face burning as I sat there, surrounded by people who couldn't see past their own definitions of success. But then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number with a California area code. Normally I wouldn't answer during family time, but something made me step away from the group. Is this Michael Henderson, CEO of DataVantage Solutions? Yes, this is Michael. Mr. Henderson, this is Sarah Kim calling from Apex Ventures in Palo Alto. We've been tracking your company's growth, and we'd like to discuss a potential acquisition offer. Are you available to talk? My heart started racing. Apex Ventures wasn't just any firm. They were the people behind some of the biggest tech acquisitions of the last decade. As Sarah outlined their preliminary interest, a potential acquisition in the $20 to $25 million range, I could hear my family's laughter continuing in the background, completely oblivious to what was happening 20 feet away. When I hung up, I stood there for a moment, looking out at the lake, processing what had just occurred. The irony was almost too perfect. Here I was at the same dock where my father had dismissed my computer games as worthless, holding an acquisition offer that was worth more than his consulting firm's annual revenue. I walked back to the group, where the conversation had moved on to my father's latest golf handicap and his plans for expanding Henderson and Associates into the Twin Cities suburbs. He was in full performance mode, gesturing with his martini while explaining his 5-year vision for the company. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how it ends, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support really helps us continue sharing these kinds of personal stories. But I wasn't ready to reveal what had just happened. Not yet. Something about the moment felt like it needed to build, like the universe was setting up something bigger than just a family argument. I had no idea how right I was. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of perfect Minnesota summer weather that makes you forget about the brutal winters. The whole extended family had gathered on the main deck for my father's traditional 4th of July toast, a yearly ritual where he'd reflect on American entrepreneurship and the Henderson family's contribution to Minneapolis business community. About 30 people were there, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, plus several of my father's business associates and their families. The kind of crowd where everyone had an opinion about everyone else's life choices, and they weren't shy about sharing them. My father stood up, raising his glass of Macallan 18, wearing his navy blazer with the Minneapolis club pin. As we celebrate our nation's independence, I want to talk about the independence that comes from building something meaningful, something that lasts. He was in his element, commanding the attention of successful people who respected his achievements. Henderson and Associates didn't happen overnight. It took vision, persistence, and most importantly, understanding that real success isn't about chasing every shiny new trend. I felt the dig immediately. Several people glanced in my direction. Some young people today think they can skip the fundamentals, think they can build something substantial without paying their dues. His voice carried across the deck with that authoritative tone that had intimidated me my entire life. But lasting success, the kind that supports families and communities, that comes from proven business principles, not get-rich-quick schemes. My cousin Mark, a commercial real estate broker, jumped in. You're talking about Michael's computer thing, aren't you, Uncle Rich? The conversation turned to me like a spotlight. Suddenly everyone was weighing in on my phase, and when I'd grow out of it. My grandmother suggested I find a nice stable job with benefits. Jennifer's fiancé offered to connect me with recruiting firms in Chicago. Uncle Bob, now 3 bourbons deep, declared that real men build things with their hands, not typing on keyboards all day. My mother tried to intervene. Boys, let's not turn this into, but my father was just getting started. Michael, you're 24 years old. You've had your fun pretending to be an entrepreneur, but it's time to join the real world. I'm offering you a genuine opportunity to learn from someone who's actually built a successful business. The humiliation was complete. 30 people, including family friends and business associates, all nodding in agreement as my father systematically dismantled my life's work. But something had shifted inside me since yesterday's phone call. I wasn't the same person who used to shrink under his criticism. I stood up slowly, pulling out my phone. Dad, before I respond to your generous offer, I should probably take this call. It's from my lawyers. The confused murmur that went through the crowd was exactly what I was hoping for. I put the phone to my ear, pretending to listen for about 30 seconds while everyone watched. Interesting timing, I said, hanging up and looking directly at my father. That was confirmation about the acquisition offer I received yesterday. Apex Ventures wants to buy my computer thing for $23 million. The deck went completely silent. You could hear the lake water lapping against the dock below. The same company that's been playing around with websites just got acquired by one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. The deal closes next month. My father's face had gone pale. Jennifer's mouth was literally hanging open. Uncle Bob set down his bourbon glass with a clink that seemed to echo. But here's what's really interesting, Dad. During due diligence, Apex's research team pulled some fascinating data about the Minneapolis consulting market. Turns out Henderson and Associates has been losing clients to digital transformation specialists for the past 18 months. Your revenue is down 23% year over year because businesses are moving toward data-driven decision-making, exactly what my computer games have been providing. I could see my father processing this information, his mind racing through the implications. So when you ask when I'm going to join the real world and build something that matters, I already have. I built something worth more than your entire company's annual revenue. But more importantly, I built something that solves real problems for real businesses, instead of just telling them what they want to hear in conference rooms. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then I delivered the line I'd been unconsciously preparing for years. Thanks for the offer, Dad. But I don't think Henderson and Associates is quite ready for the real world yet. I set down my beer, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and walked toward my car. Behind me, I could hear the eruption beginning, shocked voices, my mother calling my name, Jennifer demanding to know if I was serious about the acquisition. But my father didn't say anything. When I looked back from my car, he was still standing there, holding his whiskey, staring at the spot where I'd been sitting. For the first time in my life, Richard Henderson looked like he didn't know what to say. I drove back to Minneapolis that night feeling something I'd never experienced before. Not revenge, exactly, but something deeper. Like I'd finally stood up for not just myself, but for everyone who'd ever been told their dreams weren't good enough by someone who was supposed to believe in them. What I didn't know was that my father would spend that entire night awake, and the conversation we'd have 3 weeks later would change everything I thought I knew about him. The aftermath of that 4th of July confrontation was immediate and chaotic. By Tuesday morning, my phone was buzzing with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in months. My Aunt Linda called to tell me I'd broken your mother's heart. My cousin Sarah texted asking if the acquisition news was real. My grandmother, bless her, called to ask if I needed any money to tide me over during this difficult time. She still didn't quite understand what had happened. But the call that surprised me most came from Jennifer on Wednesday evening. Instead of her usual lecturing tone, she sounded almost subdued. Michael, I need to tell you something. After you left on Sunday, Dad locked himself in his study for hours. Mom found him going through old financial documents, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. There's something about the company that he's never told us. Henderson and Associates isn't as stable as we thought. They've been hemorrhaging clients to digital consultancies, just like you said. Dad's been using his personal savings and a line of credit against the lake house to keep the business afloat. He's been hiding it for almost 2 years. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, my father's desperation to get me to join the firm made sense. He wasn't just offering me a job, he was throwing me a lifeline to save the family legacy he'd been secretly watching crumble. But there was more. Jennifer told me that after I left, Uncle Bob had drunkenly revealed another family secret that had been kept from us kids for decades. Our father hadn't started Henderson and Associates from nothing like we'd always been told. He'd actually failed spectacularly at his first business venture, a small manufacturing company in the 80s that went bankrupt and cost him everything, including the family home in St. Paul. He was so ashamed, Michael. Mom told me he swore he'd never let his children experience that kind of failure. That's why he's been so hard on you about taking risks. He wasn't trying to crush your dreams, he was terrified you'd end up like him. That information recontextualized 24 years of criticism and disappointment. Every time he dismissed my entrepreneurial efforts, every lecture about real business and paying your dues, it was all coming from a place of fear, not arrogance. The Apex Ventures acquisition moved forward quickly. Within 6 weeks, DataVantage Solutions was officially part of their portfolio, and I found myself with more money than I'd ever imagined and a 5-year consulting contract that would let me help other startups avoid the mistakes I'd made. But success felt hollow without resolving things with my family. I spent weeks crafting and deleting emails to my father, trying to find the right words. How do you apologize for publicly humiliating someone who spent years privately humiliating you? How do you rebuild a relationship that was built on mutual misunderstanding? The breakthrough came in late August. I was in my new downtown Minneapolis office, working on a partnership deal with a healthcare startup, when my assistant buzzed me. "Michael, there's a Richard Henderson here to see you. He says he's your father." My heart started racing. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since that night at the lake house. "Send him in." He looked smaller somehow, older than I remembered. The confidence that had always defined him seemed diminished. He was carrying a manila folder and wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to every important business meeting I could remember. "Michael." He nodded, taking the seat across from my desk. "Dad." We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd spent years talking past each other, finally forced to have a real conversation. "I came to apologize," he said finally, "and to ask for your help." The folder contained financial documents, Henderson and Associates, books, client retention reports, revenue projections. Everything Jennifer had told me was true. The company was failing, not because of poor management, but because the business world had evolved beyond what traditional consulting could offer. "I've been thinking about what you said at the lake house. About businesses moving toward data-driven decision-making. You were right. I was so focused on defending the way things had always been done that I missed the way things were actually going." He looked up from the papers, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father as he really was, not the intimidating success story I'd grown up fearing, but a man who'd built his entire identity around avoiding failure and was now watching everything he'd worked for slip away. "I don't know how to do what you do, Michael. I don't understand algorithms or data analytics or any of it. But I know how to build relationships with clients, and I know the Minneapolis business community better than anyone. I was hoping, maybe we could figure out how to combine what you know with what I know." The conversation lasted 3 hours. We talked about his first business failure, about why he'd been so critical of my risk-taking, about the pressure he'd felt to provide for our family after losing everything once before. We discussed the possibility of Henderson and Associates partnering with my new consulting practice, creating a hybrid firm that combined traditional business strategy with modern data analytics. But most importantly, we talked about forgiveness, both directions. I forgave him for years of making me feel like I wasn't good enough. He forgave me for the public humiliation at the lake house, acknowledging that he'd probably earned it. The unexpected twist came 3 months later, when our combined firm landed the biggest client either of us had ever worked with, a Fortune 500 company that needed both traditional strategic consulting and cutting-edge data analysis for a major digital transformation. The project was worth $4.2 million and established Henderson DataVantage Consulting as the premier business strategy firm in the Twin Cities. My father kept the lake house. More importantly, he kept his dignity and his legacy, just in a form he'd never expected. And I learned that sometimes the greatest triumph isn't proving someone wrong. It's helping them discover they were more capable than they knew. Jennifer eventually left Chicago to join our firm as managing partner. Uncle Bob still doesn't quite understand what we do, but he's stopped making jokes about computer games. And my grandmother proudly tells everyone at the country club that her grandson is in business with his father, just like it was always supposed to be. Sitting in our shared office overlooking the Mississippi River in downtown Minneapolis, watching my father explain data visualization concepts to a client with the same passion he once reserved for traditional market analysis, I'm struck by how wrong I was about almost everything. I thought success meant proving my father wrong. I thought triumph required his humiliation. I thought our relationship was irreparably broken because we spoke different languages. But the truth is more complicated and more beautiful than the revenge fantasy I'd been carrying around for years. The real victory wasn't the moment I stood up on that deck and delivered my devastating comeback. It was the moment 3 weeks later when my father walked into my office, vulnerable and asking for help, and I had the wisdom to say yes. It was learning that strength isn't about never needing anyone. It's about being brave enough to admit when you do. My father and I will never have a traditional relationship. We're business partners now, which somehow works better for us than father and son ever did. But we found something that might be even more valuable: mutual respect. He respects my vision and technical expertise. I respect his experience and relationship-building skills. Together, we've built something neither of us could have created alone. The Henderson family story didn't end with a dramatic confrontation at a lake house in Minnesota. It ended with two stubborn, proud men learning that admitting you're wrong is sometimes the most courageous thing you can do. My father learned that innovation doesn't have to mean abandoning everything you've built. I learned that honoring tradition doesn't have to mean surrendering your dreams. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this: the people who hurt us most are often fighting battles we know nothing about. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding their fear can transform our anger into something more powerful: compassion. And sometimes, compassion opens doors that revenge could never reach. My father was wrong to dismiss my dreams for so many years. I was wrong to assume his criticism came from a place of malice rather than fear. We were both right about some things and blind to others. But we were lucky enough to get a second chance to see each other clearly, and wise enough to take it. The acquisition money is nice, don't get me wrong. But the real treasure is getting to work alongside someone I spent years seeing as an opponent, and discovering he was actually a potential ally all along. The business is thriving, the family is healing, and every day I get to solve problems with someone who taught me more about resilience than he ever knew. If this story resonated with you, I'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share real stories about overcoming family challenges, building businesses, and finding success on your own terms. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss future videos, and let me know in the comments what family relationship in your life could use a fresh perspective. Sometimes the end of the story isn't about winning or losing. Sometimes it's about two people choosing to build something together instead of tearing each other down. And sometimes, that choice makes all the difference.